Hello, you're watching Rappler Talk. I'm Gaby Baizas, digital forensics researcher for Rappler. Every year, the international organization Reporters Without Borders, or RSF, releases their World Press Freedom Index, which compares the state of the press in a total of 180 countries and territories worldwide. This 2025, the Philippines received its highest press freedom ranking in 21 years, and we now rank 116th out of 180, jumping 18 places from our ranking in 2024. But what does this mean? How free is the Philippine press exactly, and what does this mean for Filipinos? Joining us today is Aleksandra Bielakowska, the Asia-Pacific Advocacy Manager of Reporters Without Borders. Great to have you with us, Aleksandra.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Pleasure to speak to you.
Okay, to get things started, as I mentioned, we currently rank 116th on the Press Freedom Index for 2025. So just to get a bit of context on the situation, how did we get here? What are some of the highlights and events that happened in the past year that led to this ranking for the Philippines?
Let me start with a very quick explanation what it means in the scale of global scale of the RSF Press Freedom Index, because indeed, as you mentioned, the Philippines are going up by 18 places, 18 ranks in the index, but the situation of the country still remains the same, which is considered a difficult situation, being second category from the bottom of the RSF Press Freedom Index. What it means? It means that the situation has slightly improved by the score that we use to evaluate the Press Freedom Index, only by 6.21 points, scoring 49 out of 100 to the questions evaluated in the index. And this showcases that the situation has only slightly improved comparing to other countries. And the movement in the index actually relates to movement of the countries that are surrounding the Philippines in the index. The score that we use to evaluate the situation is made on the basis of two components: the quantitative tally of abuses against media and journalists in connection with the web, but also the qualitative analysis of the situation in each country based on the responses to the questionnaire from the specialists such as journalists, researchers, academics, and human rights defenders. And of course, this experts are from within the country. So this is the voice of the Filipino journalist and media community speaking about the problems, difficulties that they face on the daily basis at their work in the Philippines. As mentioned before, the Philippines remains in the difficult situation, marked by the deep orange color in the index. And this can be considered as the quite serious situation for the journalists in the Philippines. The two factors, however, that have improved a lot this year. One is the legal aspect indicator, which is plus almost 5 points in the index, which might be related to the fact that we haven't seen so many cases in court. There are still pending cases, but new cases in court against journalists, and less legal harassment of journalists in general, but also the safety indicator that inches have jumped to very high level that is almost uncomparable, I think, in other cases. It's very rare to have such a jump in the safety score by 70 points to 61 out of 100 in the RSF index questionnaire. In the index, we take into consideration 5 indicators, and political indicator and economic one still remains very low. And this is something I want to emphasize because despite the improvement, why the situation is still considered quite severe and difficult is because there's still indicators that are considered as a very severe situation. And especially this is in relation to how the political actors are targeting media inside of the Philippines, but also how difficult is the economic situation that the media have right now currently in the country.
All right. Okay. And you did mention that the RSF also looks into the safety aspect. So I kind of want to talk about that more because we also found that the Committee to Protect Journalists, they said that 2024 was the first year in 2 decades where they did not record a journalist killing. So that means they didn't find any case where a journalist was killed in relation to their work. But that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that the Philippines is safe overall for journalists. Actually, earlier this year, there was a case where a photojournalist had his car bombed in the country's capital, in Metro Manila. And in the Philippines, Metro Manila is typically safer for journalists compared to journalists based in other parts of the country in different provinces. So how does the RSF take different kinds of physical attacks, physical harm, into when they're analyzing the safety of the country for the Philippines?
So RSF, very similar to other NGOs, is constantly gathering information throughout the year about abuses against journalists in connection to the work. This is very important. It needs to be abuses in connection to the work as a journalist. And we gather information about journalists who are held hostage, if they're imprisoned, killed, missing, and this is what impacts the most the score of the safety inside of the index. But we also take into consideration the detention of journalists, depending on the length, the score varies, but also rates on the media. That is updated on a daily basis to our RSF Press Freedom Barometer that can be also available on our website. And this score is counted by almost more than 30% of the safety score for the index. However, there's also 70% of the score that is evaluated by the questionnaire that I just mentioned before, that gathers 12 questions, sub-questions, that also ask them about concerned journalist safety. And we see if they can gather, identify, disseminate news and information in accordance with journalistic methods and ethics, without necessary risk of bodily harm. This is one, so murder, violence, arrest, psychological and emotional distress that could result in intimidation, harassment, and professional harm. It can be, for instance, loss of the job, if someone is, so self-censorship, if someone is trying to produce the information that is not in the line with specific, political entities or figures, etc. But I think what specifically impacted this year's score is that, similarly to other NGOs, we have not noticed and gathered information about any case of journalists being killed in the Philippines since 1995, which is quite new situation in the Philippines, because every year there was at least one case of journalists being killed due to the course of its work. And this is one of the reasons why the score has jumped so much in comparison to the past years. However, we still see a lot of Filipino journalists facing legal harassment, physical attacks, as you said, like this bombing that did not result in the killing, but is still a physical attack, as well as online violence that is widespread in the Philippines. I want to again emphasize that there needs to be a change when such a huge indicator of safety is changing in the Philippines, but the situation indeed has not improved so much, because it still remains as difficult among the same group of countries as last year. What we rather see in the global perspective of RSF Press Freedom Index, which is quite concerning to us, is that the ranks of the score of the medium countries covered by the index are declining year by year. So it's very difficult to country to keep the index result because there's more and more situation when we have widespread violence, harassment around the globe, and this impacts the position of all the countries in the index, therefore also impacting where Philippines will be placed. But of course, we see slight improvement, and we hope that this improvement will be continued in the Philippines, and that we will not see anymore in the future any case of journalists being targeted with violence for the work, for informing the public about the issues that are so important for the democracy to preserve in the Philippines.
All right. Yeah, and then you also did mention about how the situation in the Philippines, while it's still in a difficult situation, there was a slight improvement. For instance, our current president, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., he's typically known to be friendlier to the press compared to definitely his predecessor, Rodrigo Duterte, who was outright intimidating the press and threatening the press with different attacks, etc. But we've also spoken to other journalists who've tried to cover the President Marcos, and they did say that they have trouble accessing the president, that he doesn't face the media as often as he should. So how does the RSF take that into consideration when the president doesn't face the media as often as he should?
First of all, to go back, the political score of Philippines is 39 out of 100, which I must say it's very, very low. It's the very serious situation. And by very serious situation, the Philippines are put in the pool of countries, even such as, China, where the press freedom is non-existent because of the attacks of the political actors on the media. And this is something that is highly concerning. Again, we see slight improvement in comparison to President Duterte in the past. As you say, the Ferdinand Marcos is more open and friendly towards the media. So we see this slight change and move in the good direction. But it doesn't change the fact that the situation remains very serious. And if you just look at the political factor of the Philippines and impact on the media, Philippines would be right now in the red color on the RSF map. So this is something that is quite concerning. What we see with the transparency of the officials is that all political figures, it doesn't matter if this is government, parliament, or representatives of the parties, the transparency towards the media is the key for the healthy democracy. And all journalists should be have a right to question the policies of the government and should be allowed to question even if these questions are considered as not easy for the authorities. And access to reliable and factual information is a basis of functioning societies and democracies. And only in the situation when those of power can be checked, media can serve as a watchdogs of elected officials, therefore creating the healthy environment inside of democracy, because the media is essential to democratic participation in general. That's why we deplore this type of behavior, no matter the affiliation, no matter which media is concerned, which journalist is concerned. All journalists should be treated equally. All journalists should be allowed to question the authorities, be allowed to interview the elected officials so that they can have them in check with their actions and question if they think there is something to be questioned about the policies. So I hope that with this small improvement in the past year with President Marcos' views on the media and the fact that he's not openly criticizing them, which was, of course, very deplorable with what Rodrigo Duterte was doing in the past. I hope that this will also change and that in this future we'll see more openness towards the media outlets and specifically we need to call it the transparency that is so needed for the functional democracy in Philippines.
Yes, definitely. The press really is doing their best to try to hold their governments accountable. It's really essential for democracy. And you also mentioned that the RSF Index also looks into the professional aspect of journalists because we also look at the economic aspect as well. So I just want to provide some context that the journalism industry in the Philippines is also struggling economically and professionally. We've seen closures of some newsrooms because they had lots of losses mounting, so they had no choice but to shut down. We've also seen layoffs around the world on different newsrooms, and definitely there are also a lot of Filipino journalists who are resigning and looking for more financially stable careers. Because the members of the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, they also say that there can be no press freedom if journalists are not free from conditions of poverty. So how does the RSF look into conditions like this, the working conditions of journalists, and how does that play into the press freedom of a country?
So starting again with my discourse that I'm mentioning again, because I think very important to divide this analysis into specific factors inside of the country's economical factor in Philippines remains the lowest right now. It's almost a similar like political one, but it's one of the lowest in the country among the indicators. This is the overall global trend we've noticed this year by analyzing the situation of the country's unrest freedom index among 180 countries that we evaluate, with economic indicator and situation being the most severe among 5. It's related to low salaries, subpar working conditions, and general centralized ownership of the media outlets. And despite the fact that we see that the physical attacks against journalists are the most visible violations of press freedom, and this is something that people mostly speak about in terms of the media freedoms around the world, actually the economic pressure has a major and most bigger blow to the press freedom around the world, including in the Philippines. And as the result, the global state of press freedom globally is now classified as the difficult situation for Philippines is a very serious situation. It's the first time in the index history around the globe that this result is so low, which means that the result is below 55 points. It means that it's very difficult for the media to keep reporting, finding, content, resources to provide the readers, viewers with reliable information, because these resources are so important for them to continue working and find ends meet, basically. So this is another thing that we cannot stop noticing. And again, Philippines, I think, is one of the best examples among democracies, not only in Asia-Pacific region, but mostly globally, how this economic indicator is impacting the media landscape inside of the country, and how much it infringes basically the media scene and the capacity of journalists to continue the work.
Yeah, definitely. So we're hoping to see better working conditions for journalists, not just in the Philippines, but worldwide as well. And just to wrap things up, because we did see that there are lots of global trends also with the state of press freedom declining in several areas around the world. So what are some concrete steps that the Philippines, as well as other countries, can do to improve the state of press freedom? And what does this mean for our readers, our audience? Like, what does press freedom mean for the ordinary citizen, the ordinary Filipino?
I would really focus maybe on Philippine situation, and reason for that is I think Philippines have one of the most vibrant media scenes in Asia-Pacific region, when there's dozens of media outlets operating on a daily basis that are really trying to cover the issues even in very dangerous zones and areas of the country, which really impacts the capacity of doing the work. But also because Philippines are the one of emerging democracies, and this is so important for the Philippines to arise one of the strongest democracies in not only Asia-Pacific region, but more broadly globally. But without the healthy media environment, this is something that cannot be achieved. And I think the authorities must face this reality and face this issue, and finally find a willingness and political will to change those issues inside of the country. And there's so many things that should be addressed right away, starting with the release of the only journalist being detained in Philippines. Francimia Cupio has been languishing in prison for 5 years, arrested under criminal charges, following the red tagging, surveillance, intimidation, harassment. And we see this as the retaliation of her work as a journalist, and the fact that the journalist like this, in such a young age, is being prosecuted for her work, is really showing a really bad light on how the government, the authorities are targeting journalists. Without her being released from prison, it will be very difficult for us to improve the situation, for the government to improve the situation inside of the Philippines. The same is with the infamous practice of red tagging of journalists. This is something that during Marcos' administration maybe has calmed down a bit, but we still have many cases of journalists who are being intimidated, harassed, threatened, or even attacked by the state authorities, government officials, or members of security forces, just because they try to do the work as a journalist and reporting on factual information. There are even the cases of journalists who need to hide because of the situation, and we get these reports on a daily basis that are received by us. The third point I think that is very important is finally end the impunity of killings against journalists. This is something that the government has promised on so many occasions. They said that they will try to do something to fix this issue, but we haven't seen much progress in this regard in the past years. I think one example that we should start with is the case of Jerry Ortega and the fact that his alleged mastermind, Gary Ortega murder, is finally in police custody is of course a positive step. But until now, we haven't seen a movement in and basically delays in the court hearings. And we believe that this case will be a very positive sign to showcase that the authorities will not allow this type of behavior and attacks against journalists in the Philippines in the future. And resolving of this even very old cases, because it's 13 years for the mastermind of this crime to flee from the prosecution. This would really signal for not only the journalists but also the public that the government is finally taking into consideration and finally taking seriously this type of behaviors. But at the same time, there's so many other levels that needs to be fixed, starting with the ending of policy of harassing journalists, critical to the government, dropping the remaining charges against Maria Ressa, for instance, and of course your media Rappler, by regranting the broadcasting licenses of ABC, CBN, by seizing pressure of the alternative media such as Alta Media, Buletlat, Deva Today. There's so many cases, even if they started during the Duterte time, that is still continuing with this current government. And without this fixing of this problem and finally taking a political will to address these problems, we really not see such an improvement in the press freedom situation in the Philippines. And I think it should be very important, and I hope there is a change in this regard inside of the government, for them to understand that without the access to reliable and factual information, there will be no functional democracy in Philippines. It will be very flooded. It will be very difficult for them to keep this democratic system. And media outlets are in the center of that, are in the center because they're really the watchdogs of all political powers, but not only government, it's also, regional leaders, other political figures, it can be businessmen. The media are really in the center of having those in power in check. So this is so important, especially taking into consideration the information chaos that we're facing right now with the social media, that we need to have access. The public need to know which media provide us reliable, unbiased, and factual information, and they need to have the entities that can provide them with this resource and allow them to basically access this information. And it's only going to improve the democracy. And I hope that in this way, by fixing all those issues inside of Philippines that are impeding so much the media scene in the Philippines, I really hope that we can see a higher improvement, bigger improvement in the media landscape, in the press freedom in the Philippines, and maybe one day Philippines could be in the same level as other democracies in the region, could be maybe not green color, but at least yellow color when the situation is satisfactory, but it's not difficult as we see right now in the Philippines. And I wish something like this will happen, but this is something that really requests action, reforms, political will, and most notably, at least end of harassment, targeting of the media outlets on every political level that we see right now in the Philippines.
All right, great. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us, Aleksandra. And we're really hoping for better conditions for the press, not just in the Philippines, but worldwide, and that we'll get to enjoy more freedoms for a better informed society. If you have any questions or insights on this topic, download our Rappler Communities app so we can continue the conversation there. Once again, this is Gaby Baizas for Rappler Talk. Thank you for joining us.